Hi, today is the 26th of May, Thursday, 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, and additionally like my official YouTube videos and go to my website www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, one and the same. Similarly to whether in those who understand, whether in the vanilla sector and or in the supposed to be consenting adult biologically lifestyle, such as the BDSM lifestyle and or the swinger lifestyle. The LGBTQP lifestyle, well, there's more along the lines of certain factors that obviously more in different ways as to the supposed to be consenting biological adult aspects that would align to the references of the BDSM and or swinging lifestyle, in my opinion. So personal opinion, I know that there are those who have differing opinions. However, especially when it comes to someone such as Caitlyn Jenner and others in that particular reference, I would guesstimate the understanding as to the choice to transition in that capacity would be best in the reference point of being a biological adult, because of the capability to have the intellectual as well as emotional capacity to review what is actually best in comparison to the fact that in the biological minor ages, which would be underneath the biological age of 18 years old and or 21 years old, having the capacity to actually review those situations in comparison to, in my opinion, as a pansexual, biologically born female viewpoint as to the different genetic markers as well as hormone factors and growth situations in the physical situation as well as the emotional capacities in conjunction to the mental health awareness as well as obviously the sexuality portion, though the spiritual portions as to the internal peace to be capable to make various decisions with clear thoughts. Now, I have not met that I know of Caitlyn Jenner, though I would guesstimate her among others who have made the choice into that particular transition would be capable to give their opinions from their own experiences, not just in reference to their youth, such as their childhood youth, as well as their teenager youth, though also their time frame in their young adult aspects, which personally I consider young adult as being above the biological age of 18 years old, into about the time frame of the 30 to 35-year-old range to be considered as a young adult in the biological factor. That is my opinion, however. So I'm just going to be hitting into what would be considered ish adult aspects by the comparison of the way that in this particular modern time of the year of 2022, the reality that we are living longer as science and technology have progressed to assist with the capability of having longer lives, as well as the assistive factors that technology is capable to bring forward in conjunction with the scientific references. I would guesstimate that I cannot be the only individual who would have that capability to recognize and acknowledge that in reference to the overall Homo sapien sapien or human species race, which in that capacity of my particular opinion, I would guesstimate there would be plenty of others with their own personal experiences who would have the capacity to go into those references. In conjunction to that, since Caitlyn Jenner has if I remember correctly, as far as what I have heard, she lives out in the California region. And out in California, there's this location called the Pacific area of the oceanic waters, and possibly she could have seen a boat a time or two, not just in reference to what would be considered a personal boat, though in conjunction to a military vessel, such as a Coast Guard vessel and or a Marine Corps vessel and or a Navy vessel in the references of. And so while I don't know if she herself has been involved with scuba diving, however, in the year of 2020, I learned that the particular group that I had earned all 26 scuba diving certifications through, which is PADI, or Professional Association of Diving Instructors, in comparison to NAUI, which I don't know what the acronym is for NAUI, though I learned that they, in the year of 2021, are headquartered in the Florida region, which I personally had landed at the deepest portion of the oceanic waters in the area where the Vandenberg, or the USS General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, had been sunken, which is out in the Florida Keys. Those who have not been scuba diving and or those who have not been involved with marine biology or studies into marine biology could be capable to go and research certain factors. However, I cannot remember what the specific YouTube video was, though there was a reference to military scuba divers, if I recall correctly, the Navy SEALs, and they had brought up that the rebreathers that they use were being utilized at what was called in the video a dangerous depth level of 40 feet. And yet, the reality for recreational civilian scuba diving, the average allowance that is taught to an open water scuba diver is 130 feet. So with a rebreather, that would be a smidgen difficult for someone such as myself. I had listened to a official YouTube video between the interview of Joe Rogan with astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, where Neil deGrasse Tyson had brought up how he likes to go to certain movies to review certain factors as an astrophysicist. Well, I did not graduate basic training. I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 when I was in basic training. Yet I have earned 26 scuba diving certifications. I had been invited to Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment in my prior official YouTube videos, as well as through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, the capacity to go through that particular set of information in conjunction with my particular books that I have been capable to author and compile and publish in regards of, thankfully, through Amazon. The links are available through my website. As he had acknowledged in his interview with Joe Rogan, I had paid attention when I had heard regarding, again, I cannot recall what specific YouTube video had the discussion, or I shouldn't say discussion, the information made available in that particular video, had brought forward that these Navy SEALs with rebreathers at the dangerous level as claimed of 40 feet, which again, I reiterate, in the civilian recreational scuba diving, such as in depending of how you particularly have been trained and or work, those particular factors, an open water scuba diver is trained to be allowed to go to 130 feet, possibly 170 feet at the maximum level as a open water scuba diver. And yet, these well-trained, military-style individuals with rebreathers, which are far more intricate in comparison to a regular scuba diving gear regulation setup, were given the information in that YouTube video of 40 feet. I personally have, because of the 26 scuba diving certifications I earned in conjunction to my background and so on and so forth, I have a difficulty believing that Navy SEALs who were trained in quite a few factors had a quote-unquote dangerous scuba dive with rebreathers at 40 feet. Now, I can agree, depending on what their particular mission could have been, that would be considered as dangerous. However, the wording was that it was a dangerous depth level at 40 feet. Now, if they had said 40 atmospheric measurements with the rebreather, I could agree in that particular reference, depending on what their depth level was before their scuba diving and during their mission, to then drop down again and go to 40 atmospheric measurements with a rebreather, if that is what was viewed in comparison to the discussion of 40 feet. However, the way that measurements are considered regarding scuba diving, whether in regards of my style of scuba diving and or military style of scuba diving and or law enforcement style of scuba diving and or fire department style of scuba diving and or EMS style of scuba diving and or the civilian recreational style of scuba diving, the pressure is the additional factor. So while some people think the measurement is in a linear capacity, those who have a background in studying marine biology or marine sciences, though in addition to certain similarities, obviously, as to the air areas, so that's why it's probably called aeronautical studies. The difference, though, between the pressure changes between descending into the depths of the water compared to ascending into the air is the fact of pressure. Now, in the water, you have the combined pressure regarding the actualities of the water in conjunction to the depth, whereas in the air, you have less of that. Hence, why when you get into the viewpoint of space, such as through NASA and other space programs, such as Blue Origin and SpaceX would be capable to go into, the gravitational pull situations. So you're capable to float around in space because of the lack of pressure, in comparison to when you descend into the waters, and there is obviously more pressure as well as the various current streams, which is a whole different capability to look into that detail in comparison. So, I had earned 26 scuba diving certifications. At the time when I was earning my 26 scuba diving certifications, it was the year of 2009. There has been quite a few geographical changes throughout the state of Texas in the different areas that I had gone to earn my 26 scuba diving certifications. And while at Aquarina Hot Springs, I personally have not gone into those waters since the time frame of my underwater naturalist scuba diving certification. However, I have driven through the area where Lake Travis is. I could tell the difference as to the rise in the water there compared to where, acknowledging I did not go to the Huntsville quarry itself to take a look at the water areas there. However, those who were involved in the civilian recreational scuba diving in the year of 2009, when I was earning my 26 scuba diving certifications, those individuals can go to Eisenhower State Park outside of the 1604 Anderson Loop to take a look at what those actual areas are in regards of the height and depth to take in consideration regarding the Huntsville quarry. So that way they can actually take in consideration how accurate my particular measurements are for those 3-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan Mealing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire. So, I have been an ordained reverend since the year of 2004, 2005. And while there is the legal capacity of, I have made the choice, because of quite a few factors, to utilize my first and my middle name in comparison. I have not denied my legal last name. However, because of quite a few situations, since I have my reasons for my choices to, in the general aspect, go by the name of Susan Mealing, that is my choice. So I have my maiden, also known as my enlisted legal last name. Then there is my legal widow, though also scuba diver last name. And since the knowledge that while I could possibly get into a relationship and possibly could look into that obvious factor when some people get married, the change of the last name, to remain true to who I am is to very simply go by the name of Susan Mealing. Now there is my modeling name that I created, Lady Dory Bell, and that is the facts, that I did that. But I haven't changed who I am. I have not hidden that either. I have been honest and to the point in those regards, in whichever areas. Now, while some people might not have known that when in various communities, more so from the time frame of 2009 through possibly even 2022, the reality is I haven't ever hidden that. Usually, I've introduced myself as Susan or Susan Mealing. No matter what community I've been in, people who have come up to me calling me Lady Dory Bell, those individuals usually had known me through online in reference to different websites. And that is the massive difference in comparison. So individuals I have met in person, face-to-face in person, I had gone by the name that I go by, which is Susan or Susan Mealing. Only individuals who have only seen me online in the capacities of my modeling, specifically in the years of 2009-10 to mainly 2012, had contacted me in person, face-to-face in person, utilizing the name I created, Lady Dory Bell. So I don't know who had needed that to be put together. However, I have personally known that distinguishing difference. Now, when taking into the consideration regarding my earned 26 scuba diving certifications, and having completed far more work before actually going to the first class per 26 scuba diving certifications I earned, I made sure to, for myself, as well as my best interests, as well as my safety, to do so. Because I wanted to make sure that before I had continued through each individual class per individual scuba diving certification that I earned, to actually have the knowledge and the understanding of the information. Because before going to descend into the waters, I wanted to make sure that I personally was as fully prepared as I possibly could be, due to the fact of knowing the after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, due to the fact of knowing the after effects from my subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain that took 8.5 years to dissipate from the MRI and CAT scan views, as well as due to knowing the after effects of both those to the reference of my headaches and my migraines and my memory deficits and my cognitive disorders, because of my knowledge and my understanding and my comprehension of myself. I made sure, because I am about life, to do all of this work before ever getting involved. My 26 scuba diving certifications that I particularly earned, individuals, whether they were scuba divers or instructors, would be capable, most likely by this point in time, to have discussed whether or not I had known quite a bit of information, as well as the factors of discussing certain additional components depending upon the certification course. Now, I was listening to a clip just a little bit before beginning my official YouTube video regarding Joe Rogan and Tim Pool, and they were discussing different hand signals, which one particular hand signal has to do in reference with a scuba diving hand signal, because of the fact that you have a regulator in your mouth when you go and descend into the waters when scuba diving, because that's how you breathe. And so while some people might think of the very, very decades old type of scuba diving gear where you have a large helmet around you in regards to the area of your head, over time it has progressed as to the differences. Scuba diving. And so more currently there is the regulator factor when scuba diving in comparison to the large helmet around that looks similar to a spacesuit in comparison to scuba diving. Now, when they discussed this particular factor, individuals who know scuba diving hand signals know that the OK symbol is one of several hand signals when having some version of communication underneath the water. Now, that also requires people to actually pay attention in comparison when scuba diving. That requires, additionally, being no further than an arm's distance away from one another, because any further of a distance from your assigned scuba dive buddy, or if you're in a relationship, the facts of, in order to actually communicate in those references. If the scuba diver is any further than an arm's distance away, there is not that capacity to actually have that communication regarding hand signals underneath the water. Obviously, for those who have actually been involved with scuba diving, those who have not been involved with scuba diving, the pictures and videos have what is called water distortion, because there is a difference between the references of. So for example, in on land factors, this particular official YouTube video of mine, I am literally about 15 feet away from the camera. I would guesstimate the viewpoint regarding the actual video might give a different perspective. In comparison to the pictures I took when I was scuba diving, not in a recreational capacity. That particular difference, which would translate to it being much closer. So for the reference to the side mirrors, objects in the mirror or objects in view are far closer than they appear. So in reference to my scuba diving pictures that I took, despite the U-Haul problem and that situation, I was much closer because of the water distortion in that particular viewpoint. Now, in reference to that civilian recreational scuba diving sector, I was not aware of any of those types of needless games, of those needless problems, because I personally did not get involved in scuba diving in the capacity of a recreation. There was not one aspect of my style of scuba diving that was ever going to be considered as recreational when completing my work. So while in reference to that Joe Rogan and Tim Pool interview, which I'll put the link in regards of in the information section so you can understand, I personally did not get involved in scuba diving in a relationship with another individual in scuba diving because of the facts. I explained why I was getting involved in scuba diving in comparison to what other civilian recreational lazy scuba divers, because I was informed by individuals that's what they call themselves. They have called themselves recreational scuba divers and or lazy scuba divers. I, for the longest time, just left it as scuba divers in an overall generalized factor. However, since the year of 2019 and into 2020, I have seen the reason to distinguish between military scuba divers, law enforcement scuba divers, fire department scuba divers, EMS scuba divers, my style of scuba diving, and then the civilian recreational scuba diving sector, which then there's a difference regarding scuba dive police. Obviously, because those who earn scuba diving certifications in reference to military scuba diving would be different than scuba dive police. Those who earn scuba diving certifications in reference to law enforcement scuba diving would be different than my reference to scuba diving police. Same thing in reference to those who earn scuba diving certifications in reference to fire department would be different in comparison to what I have referred to in regards of scuba diving police. Additionally, scuba divers who have earned scuba certifications in reference to EMS or emergency medical services would be different than in the reference of scuba diving police, just as in the civilian recreational scuba diving sector, who would need that the most as to the scuba diving police. For example, in the year of 2009, there were a bunch of civilian recreational scuba divers who decided to ask me knowing that I'm medically retired from the Army. Yes, I didn't graduate basic training, though they also knew that I had been invited to Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment, or MAST for short, which is part of why they asked me in regards of my particular opinion as to their choice to go scuba diving in an underground missile silo, which I had highly recommended against. I had given recommendations as the tiniest portion of what I legally could have discussed at that particular point in time because of the facts. And so those individuals made the choices that those individuals made the choices of. Now, in the reference to how that was literally the only group that I personally had felt, or I should say had the sensation of being at a home sort of community in comparison, then having realized the aspects as to those particular factors regarding the difference between civilian recreational scuba divers compared to myself. So if those who knew me in the year of 2009, I was not a civilian recreational scuba diver simply in the fact that 80 to 90% of scuba divers would not set up a campsite to actually camp out in a tent over the weekend during the time frame of. As a matter of fact, it was less than 99% who actually would do that. So while I would camp out over the weekend and do my scuba diving work that I had to do, the situations in those particular references as to the difference. Now, it was the year after the death of my children's biological father, my dead ex-husband, who I had not been capable to get the legal divorce from at that time, though we had been in the second and final separation during the time frame of my scuba diving, or before my scuba diving, his situation where he had been called on IRR, as he claimed, which turned out to be a lie that he had told, as you could see in reference to the dress blues. And those dress blues that he decided to wear in regards of throughout the years of 2004 through 2007 to when he did a picture set with my son, my daughter, and I, as well as the situation regarding the garage and Cactus Jack in that reference at the JCPenney's, which I have discussed as well as put in writing that CID interrogation that I dealt with, among a few other factors in the conjunction of the Chief Warrant Officer Tree, who had explained and went over the details, which my ex-in-laws would be capable to take a look at the pictures that they decided to take at the funeral to see how truthful the Chief Warrant Officer Tree had been in comparison to the JCPenney pictures, which Grandpa Nichols, their family member whose rack that actually was, instead. And so for those who know anything about military time frame for the infantry, my dead ex-husband had been in the Army around the time frame of 1995 or 1996 through the year of 2000. Those who have seen the JCPenney picture regarding the dress blues, remember, I did not graduate basic training, so I wouldn't know. I know what two ribbons look as. One ribbon is the basic training ribbon, The other ribbon is the Medal of Honor ribbon, only because when I was in basic training, I had met a Medal of Honor recipient who was walking with one of the commanders at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That is the only reason why I know what that particular ribbon looks as, for the clarifications. While I may have seen it before my head injury, before that point in time at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, I can't remember if I have. Nonetheless, at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, there were a few situations regarding the males that had problems because as a 17-year-old biological female, I had wanted to go in the infantry or cavalry or combat arms or MP because of the knowledge that I had from a nightmare from my childhood, and I knew that the only way, or I should say, I had the sensation the only way I could actually be of any benefit regarding quite a few situations would be to go through the training in order to be capable to assist what I could see. So anybody who's ever been in the infantry throughout whatever years, it was the year of 2000 and I was 17 years old. Anybody who's been in cavalry, remember, it was the year 2000 and I was 17 years old. Anybody who's been in combat arms, remember, it was the year 2000 and I was 17 years old. For anybody who's been an MP, remember, it was 2000, I'm 17 years old, and I'm 5'4". So, in those regards as to being stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and anybody who's gone into basic training, I'm sure that you've had the similar aspects of the equivalent of anybody who hasn't. Well, if you have transferred from one school to another school during a school year, and you've ever had to stand up in front of the class and say, "Hi, my name is," and all that sort of stuff, well, that's what we had to do during basic training. So everybody in my basic training was around I think there was like 1 or 2 males that were 18 years old, maybe 19 years old. The rest of the males were in their early to mid 20s, like around 23, 24 years old and older. And the females were all around the ages of 22 years old and older, and I was 17. And so, anybody who has any knowledge of can pretty much take in consideration the year of 2000. So it's before 9/11/2001 or 11 September 2001, and I was 17 years old. If individuals still have a difficulty imagining how that basic training actually was for me, well, there's the entire state of Texas from the year of 2000 through the year 2013, as well as 2019 through 2021 for certain references regarding the treatment or mistreatment that I dealt with during those time frames in that short amount of time regarding basic training. In addition, multiple times I was asked about what movies, just as everybody else had, what movies had I watched? So then you have the additional factor of, well, I was allowed to watch. So people who I grew up with in New Jersey know this particular reference. So in basic training, as a 17-year-old biological female, I had to acknowledge, well, I haven't seen a rated R movie yet, but I'm ready to go in the army and save the world. So yeah. Then I was, I'm sure if you're listening and paying attention to those. Do you remember I was 17 years old and it was 2000? I had graduated high school early. I don't have any direct family member that I grew up around that was active duty. There's no direct lineage in that capacity of, even when you bring up, my grandpa Gavitt, I'm not biologically his granddaughter. So, 17 years old. And so there's that, and and so then, well, what movies did you watch? So remember, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Disney. I saw a lot of Disney movies, and Sailor Moon. Yeah. So anybody who's been a drill sergeant, you can envision that particular factor. Then when I was asked, what comics did I read? Well, I like the Sunday comics. Which particular one are you talking about, Drill Sergeant? Which, those who have the knowledge of other types of comic books? Apparently. Then I was asked, well, what do you mean the Sunday comics? In the newspaper? Every Sunday? No, just envision this for this particular lecture. I'm standing in front of the basic training battalion as a 17-year-old. Yep. Well, drill sergeant, how do you not know what the Sunday newspaper is? Those are the only comics I know about. What other comics could there be? At Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Just think about that. 17 years old. I'm gonna go save the world. Yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Yeah. So then it was asked of me, well, what television shows did you watch as a child? And all of the television shows that I could bring up aired before 8:30 p.m. or 20:30 for military time. Yeah, no, drill sergeant, I could totally handle stuff. I really can. Yeah. I could totally be all rawr. Just think, for anybody who's been in you don't even have to have been a drill sergeant to see that understanding. Yep, it'd be so rawr. Go beat up the bad guys. So then, when some of the individuals in my basic training, mainly males, only certain ones, so you have the reference of the road march that I've given where I was the lead, and then there was the flag bearer on the right side of the road march where I was on the left side when walking. I know, I'm a Republican, I know, it's okay. And so, nonetheless, I, during the road march, had been arguing with the guy where there's enough room for 2 Humvees or 2 dualies to drive side by side, for those who would know wherever that particular road march was. And I'm arguing with the flag bearer, telling him I'm the one who sets the pace. Drill Sergeant Parsley runs up from the middle area of the entire battalion for that road march to find out why the 2 of us were arguing. Drill Sergeant Parsley found out, smoked the flag bearer as I held the flag, and then had informed him I was correct. And so in that time frame, then I was sent to the rear, and those who know what that translates to of bringing up the rear, while all the other people in that battalion of basic training somehow thought that I was in trouble in comparison to thinking about themselves as far as why someone is sent to bring up the rear. That's how that goes. And so then there was the situation of a male who had been friends with the flag bearer, who had a problem accepting the fact that I was born and raised in New Jersey, because he seemed to think that I was, in comparison to how that particular individual had thought, that because I had a Illinois driver's license, his opinion was just because somebody has an Illinois driver's license that they couldn't live anywhere else. And so we got into an argument on the bleachers just before the demo regarding that. And instead of that individual having the common sense to be capable to ever think that anybody could ever live anywhere else, even having brought up the fact that everybody was brought to basic training through traveling, that individual thought he was more intelligent because he saw a driver's license and it said Illinois in comparison. And so then there were other issues because I was proven accurate during the time frame of being on that bleachers because of the different calls that I had made in reference to the way the bushes were, and they were actually soldiers with different firepower regarding rifles, in conjunction to bringing up how they were going to do a demo in regards of the particular armory, because we were on an armory installation. And all the other males that were associated with that flag bearer who thought that they knew better were all schooled right there. Then after we were done and we went to road march back to the DFAC, then the drill sergeants lit in to each and every one of those males because of how ignorant they were, because they had asked everyone what they thought we were going to do when we were in the bleachers after one of the drill sergeants had heard me call it. And so all of the others literally were smoked as I stood there in reference to with the drill sergeants because of my accuracy. For clarification. So, in 2009, I had informed these civilian recreational scuba divers that I wasn't interested in lazy scuba diving at that point in time. It was a year after my son and my daughter's biological father had died, and less than a year after my son and my daughter's grandfather had died. And these civilian recreational scuba divers thought whatever they thought. So during one particular camp out session, this particular male I had dealt with later at Lake Travis was at Clear Springs Scuba Park. His name's Curtis Powell. This individual tried to tell me, as well as the group that was camping out that night, he tried to tell me he thought, his opinion was the finances that he had looked into without ever taking in consideration I knew nothing about the life insurance aspects during that time frame, which I had explained. And he tried to claim that he he had the feeling, the sensation that he knew absolutely nothing in the reality. However, he claimed that he knew that his opinion was correct because he thought that the life insurance policy was so I could go luxuriously scuba dive. His words, luxuriously scuba dive. So if I were to luxuriously scuba dive, in my opinion, I would not have camped out at Clear Springs Scuba Dive in a tent if I was looking to luxuriously scuba dive. If I was looking to luxuriously scuba dive, I also probably would not have had MREs. In conjunction to that, I probably wouldn't have had a tent, and instead I would have either slept in a vehicle or, comparatively, like the bed of a truck where there's an actual covering from the weather and animals in the area. And or I would have gone to a hotel to stay at, more, upscale of a hotel, like a 4 and 5 star hotel if I was gonna luxuriously scuba dive, in comparison. Or if I was gonna luxuriously scuba dive, I probably would have just gone back to my house in comparison. However, those types of civilian recreational scuba divers with whatever background, sure, could have a military background or a law enforcement background or a fire department background or an EMS background. That's nice if you're doing civilian recreational scuba diving, though. Well, that's a difference. And so my style of scuba diving, as I explained, was with each of my 26 scuba diving certifications. Well, I had explained I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I had remembered going out to the shoreline of New Jersey, various beaches. The first beaches that I had gone out to go swimming, in reference out to the buoys, along the jetties and stuff like that, when you still could see them. In regards of the differences, that would be Point Pleasant Beach. That would be where my babysitter and her friend would take some of the children, such as myself, to the beach. We'd go to Point Pleasant. And when in reference to summer camp, we usually went to Seven Presidents Beach, which has far more violent waves, by far, in quite a few capacities, though that has to do with a few things. Now that I've seen that at Point Pleasant, I didn't see any jetties. Well, there is the fact of the oceanic waters rising. Obviously, because at the Seven Presidents Beach, you used to be capable in the 1980s into the 1990s, up to the year of 1997, you could walk out about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile on top of those jetties during high tide. For clarifications, that's how much the oceanic water levels have actually risen to be capable for those in various civilian studies and or such as NOAA, because I very much do remember that. And so, while that individual, Curtis Bell, had claimed he knew all sorts of stuff about me, well, let's say in reference to that CID interrogation, and let's say there was the Chief Warrant Officer tree who had informed them about the facts in reference to the JCPenney portraits compared to the actualities of the paperwork and so on and so forth. Well, those CID agents, ironically, might not have been allowed to actually see my military background, because hypothetically, they would have thought I was a civilian. Because, they probably thought that because of how I look. In comparison, that would require them, though, to actually do that research, because I was not a dependent. I am a blue ID card holder. I have always been the sponsor. In comparison to that situation, hypothetically, and so the irony is CID guys from the year 2000, along with the Air Force guy regarding when I came back to the state of Texas after convalescent leave, and a few others regarding the particular type of clearance I had at the age of 17. Having been invited to Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment, whatever that minimum is at the age of 12, before being 17 years old to go in the Army. And so, sure, supposed to do logistics. Every military installation needs a logistical officer, in whatever capacity of. Every type has to have somebody in logistics. There's not one military installation that doesn't have a logistic area. For those who don't know what logistics is, that's supply. Hi. Yeah. I was just 17 years old. And so then there's that. But anyway, in the year of 2009, having went to the civilian recreational scuba divers, this male actually thought it was a luxury, in his opinion, compared to where I was born and raised. So all you have to do is look at Marlboro Township. And sure, I grew up going around the New Jersey area as well as the New York City area and New York State area and Pittsburgh area and Philadelphia area and Lancaster area, or like the Pennsylvania State area. Though if that male, Curtis Powell, needed to see what I grew up around, well, all he'd have to do is meet my biological sister. And while I didn't have those luxuries, if you want to call some of that, the reality is, what she's accustomed to having is what I had been accustomed to being around. And so, if that's considered as luxury to go camping at Clear Springs with MREs, in comparison, yes, there were times where we had barbecue and everything like that. That wasn't in my choice, though. That was other people's choices, because I had MREs and whatever their thoughts were at the time frame. So while they might have thought that I was whatever their opinion, I wasn't there for civilian recreational scuba diving at all. Again, luxurious scuba diving would probably translate to how I wouldn't have had to earn as many scuba diving certifications before I had the sensation of being comfortable enough with my scuba dive gear before going to the ocean. Probably, additionally, I probably wouldn't have gone to certain areas if I was looking at luxurious scuba diving. Possibly. So that male and I, we didn't get along at all whatsoever. There were a few differences of opinion because, well, I wouldn't play games, though I was made fun of for how I physically look. I wouldn't be involved with those civilian recreational situations because I'm not that type. And so while the hypothetical in reference to civilian recreational scuba divers regarding the interview between Joe Rogan and Tim Pool as to certain signaling, well, while those people would know that, that's those people. I wasn't involved with scuba diving, as I explained from day one before my first class, that I wasn't there for that. I was not there to do civilian recreational scuba diving at all, in any capacity. Though I suppose it was my mistake to consider that as a home type of a community because of what my viewpoint of what a home type of community would be. Because a home type of community, in comparison to what I grew up with, would actually be better than that. By far. Because if I wanted to have my home community the way I grew up, well, then I would have spent more time willingly with Mike, Anna, and Patricia. And or I would have spent more time willingly with my ex-in-laws in comparison to making my own path instead. So, if they wanted to act similarly to my ex-in-laws and or my biological mother and or biological father and or biological sister, well, it would make sense why I'd rather go deeper in the water than be where they were at. Hypothetically. Because I'm just not that type of a scuba diver to have that superficiality type of situation. And so if I was doing luxurious scuba diving, well, I probably also wouldn't have had over 100 hours of scuba diving only in the state of Texas before ever booking my trip to go out to Cozumel. Probably before that 100-hour mark, probably would have been somewhere much more luxurious in comparison to the state of Texas and the waters there. I probably, hypothetically, would have gone somewhere prettier than the state of Texas as far as the waters, because who really goes and gets excited to go scuba diving as a luxury? I mean, that is unless you need the kiddie pool version. And then yes, it's the kiddie pool version of scuba diving, if that's what you consider a luxury. Because the oceanic waters, well, there's no kidding around. I mean, unless you stay in a certain area and that sort of stuff. This also goes into like those who do the type of scuba diving where they go into a barred area and it's like a playpen. When scuba diving, they have their little playpen around them, and they go, while all the other real scuba divers do whatever, they have a little playpen while they have their regulator binky and stuff like that, because that's the facts. And that's my viewpoint. I mean, I also think it's kind of stupid to put chum in the water, because obviously you're going to attract those types of sharks closer to the land. And so it's common sense to me, but there are those who go and get in their little playpens and then have the chum thrown in the water. And then people are wondering why there are so many sharks along the coastline. Well, it probably has to do with all of these recreational civilian scuba divers that are like, let's go in a playpen with our binkies and our booties and our onesies, and let's have some guys go and throw out some equivalent of bird seed, but it's called chum for the waters. And come on, here, sharky, 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 sharky. Here, sharky, sharky. Come here, sharky, sharky, sharky. Who's your little Because, I mean, it's kind of common sense. However, who's a good little sharky, sharky, sharky? Come on, sharky. Who's a little shark? Who's a little, because being in a playpen, because that's the way I viewed it. I didn't understand how anybody was like, yeah, let's do that. No, that's not only not luxurious to me, that's stupid. I'd rather go scuba dive in a kiddie pool in comparison to going and actually thinking that's a good idea. Because why would you ever think that would be a good idea for people who don't go scuba diving? This goes to Scuba Dive Police. Because, that's a reality. Oh, you're just gonna go and put chum in the water? However many nautical miles off the shoreline. And then, you're gonna drive that same boat that's covered with the little playpen that you take out of the water. You're gonna have that just kind of trailing along as you go back to port. Let me understand this math correctly. People wonder why there are an increase of shark attacks off of coastlines of the oceanic water. So let me do this math, because again, this is not luxury to me, but I have common sense. I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math, but these civilian recreational scuba divers made fun of me, yet these same recreational scuba divers wanted to go with their onesies and their binkies with their bottles attached to their regulators to go be put into a playpen and have a bunch of chum in the water. Why are there shark attacks along the shoreline? So these boats that have the chum that kind of surrounds the boat. And usually some of these boats are made of wood. What wood is considered porous? I mean, you don't even have to have the porous part because you got propellers. And so in those propellers, you got different components that can get into. And so, it's a different type of WD-40, I guess, when you take that in consideration. And, just here's the little playpen with, the chain, of course, that has those links that get covered in that chum. Let me do this math, because 1 + 1 is 2. So then after, these same civilian recreational scuba divers in their onesies with their booties and their BCDs or their floaty jackets and their bottles, also known as tanks, with their, hoses that connect to their regulator or their binkies. They take their scuba dive gear and then they go in scuba diving areas in whichever location, and all of a sudden, these non-scuba divers or maybe scuba divers all of a sudden deal with shark attacks. Maybe they even wear the same bathing suits when they go swimming off of the shoreline. Let me do this math. So there was this situation in Lake Travis where these people thought it'd be great to go and open up a can of Vienna sausages underneath the water, because all these little fishies, would come and eat the little Vienna sausages. And I asked about the oils and stuff like that. I was considered stupid. It's a good thing that I went scuba diving in Lake Travis in the year 2009, because, well, the irony of ironies, one of those particular scuba diving certifications out at Lake Travis, Curtis Powell just so happened to be there as well. There was a difference of opinion yet again. Because also, I was talking about going to the Vandenberg. And while I had one scuba dive instructor say, Susan, it's 115 feet that he said, which I laughed at because he said it was to the tower of the Oriskany. Similarly to how rebreather guys in Navy SEALs, 40 feet. To the top of the tower. That's cute that you would think it'd be 115 feet. You civilian recreational scuba divers. 115 feet. Any boat that's like a military boat's kind of bigger than 115 feet. Thinking that's 115 to the top of the tower of the Oriskany? Hold on. Unlike the Vandenberg, you have boats that come to port? You think that it's 115 feet to the top of the tower? Here's a playpen. Here's a playpen when you want to go out into the real water. Yeah, here's a playpen, because the chain is only so many feet long. Yes, but just think you're like a little ornament. So if you want to know what you look as in a different way on land, get a really tall Christmas tree. Okay? And so when you go in your little playpen, think of the tinsel as the chum. And you as this little ornament. You're like, ding, 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 ding. Because, you're throwing chum in the water. Ding, 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 dinner time, ding, 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 ding. And then you make them angry because you're in a little playpen. Yeah, in a little playpen. And in your little playpen, then you go back inside to the land area. I wonder why there's more shark attacks along the coastline. maybe that has to do with some civilian recreational scuba divers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's your fault. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is. I wrote, and after having discussed this, if people deal with certain things when they go and know that a dog is whatever of whatever, and then they go and cause neither, you can't blame the dog for what the others did. You go and handle the others for what they did, because that's their fault. That's their choices. So they went and, the equivalent of putting, for those who know, putting bacon inside of a playpen. And then they were like, here, Sharky. Here you go. Look. Ding, 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 ding. That's what they did. And I'm just like, yeah, so now I'm going to go land at the bottom of the ocean. Gonna go handle some stuff. It's the year 2009. Because no, I don't care what the civilian recreational scuba divers do. No. No, you're not allowed to do that. No, just because they put a little birdhouse there for you. No, you can't fit in it anyway. And no, when you get bigger, no, you're not allowed to use it as a rubber ducky. No. No, Bobo, no. I can make the joke in a different type of metaphor reference in regards of certain other situations. Nonetheless, not really luxurious when you really think about it. 115 feet to the top of the tower. Yeah, just like Clear Springs is a luxurious scuba dive. I mean, the only way Clear Springs would ever be considered as a luxurious scuba dive to me is, I suppose, if I actually had a relationship, and then, yeah, sure, we could go swim around the scuba park or whatever, yeah, sure, and snuggles or whatever and stuff, fine. In comparison to having to babysit a bunch of these, going and ding, 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 ding. No, I'm not in the mood to go and take care of that, because I have to go and, handle this because this civilian recreational scuba diver wants to go do this, and that civilian recreational scuba diver wants to go do that, and ding, 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 wearing lore-colored sorts of what-have-yous in comparison. But I got made fun of because when I took my scuba dive gear off, I look as I do in comparison to you don't camo when it comes to going out to the water. At all. No, not with some of those species. No. So that is as it is. Hypothetically. So, it was as it was regarding these situations. So I had listened to, additionally, yesterday, the 25th of May, 2022, a Fox News report where Nick Papadopoulos, the Trump, or President of the United States of America 45, Donald J. Trump, individual Nick Papadopoulos, I apologize, it's like a child saying spaghetti. He had brought up that there were certain individuals being investigated, and there happened to be an individual, if I remember correctly, something either Curtis and or Powell. And in this particular reference of the accusations that I dealt with, well, that's kind of the thing similarly to basic training, where I was wrongly accused as to their opinion in reference to having been born and raised in New Jersey, because of their thoughts that just because of a driver's license, which in certain ironies, I suppose, then you have the factors of nowadays with driver's licenses to assist in regards of the military component because of those factors, because of how many other situations that there have been. Because I wouldn't be surprised if individuals who, this is why the ending of all types of stolen valor, because of driving around in military regalia. It should be a problem in reference to that, and in which I wouldn't be surprised regarding certain law enforcement when they went to pull over certain individuals. Well, how do they know? This goes back to the factors of it is illegal to impersonate a law enforcement officer. Well, to end stolen valor, it should be illegal to impersonate a soldier. You don't make other people who didn't know, in those references, deal with anything unless they fight and try to claim whatever. So I know my biological mother and biological father and biological sister, as well as ex-in-laws, hypothetically would try to fight and claim whatever in those capacities of. And yet with the pictures as to the proof in those references of the JCPenney pictures compared to the dress blues, in reference to, since my ex-in-laws wanted to take pictures regarding the funeral situation, the facts are the facts. There's also the reality that they sent the film off to be developed. Even if they were capable to get the negatives back, that doesn't change the facts in those references. So there's multiple copies in that reality. Then there's the situation in reference to Laurelland Funeral Home. On top of that, you have all of the security footage in regards of the various dressing situations as to the coroner area, as far as that's concerned as well. Which is, I can make fun of myself, because after my interrogation that I dealt with regarding CID, and after having gone up the chain of command in a multitude of ways regarding Fort Sam Houston, I had been invited out to Lackland Air Force Base because I had brought up embalming situations, and the coroner out there was completely baffled as to why I would bring up embalming. And I was completely baffled why the coroner had asked me about embalming. It didn't make sense to me why the coroner wouldn't know how to do embalming at all. And apparently to the coroner, he was completely baffled how I would think that he would know as a coroner how to do embalming. Just saying, thought that that was what was done in comparison. So that is as it is. And I told some of the civilian recreational scuba divers about that, and then there was the supposed luxury as to scuba diving at Clear Springs Scuba Park and camping out. I mean, to a degree, except for my style of scuba diving, that was in the year 2009. There wasn't anything luxurious for me in 2009. And on top of that, where I was born and raised, that's definitely not considered luxury in that reference at all, whatsoever. All they'd have to do is take a look at Willow Valley and compare that. Huge difference as far as where I was sleeping at the time in comparison to Willow Valley. By a lot in that comparison. So then in reference to Joe Rogan with Tim Pool discussing certain things on that particular podcast, they had brought up the Nazi situation regarding the white supremacy because of the hand signal situation. Well, yeah, and if in a metaphor regarding scuba diving and the irony of don't California, Texas, well, there's no excuse as to why from the time of 2009, even through 2019, and into 2022, where there hasn't been that correct recognition of me for my work. Not to come across as rude, it's just the facts. There's only one person that is the proper way in order to actually have those celebrations in regards of. So any acknowledgement, if I am physically not there, which I'm not, I haven't been to any celebrations regarding anything in reference to my work in any official capacity, that hasn't ever been properly recognized. That's just the facts. They could wish to think otherwise. It's not considered acceptable, especially when you take in consideration how scuba diving is actually accomplished. So whether those individuals like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's the facts. Additionally, in the oceanic areas, those beings don't care about whether or not you've got the title of an instructor or not. Though the irony, if that individual actually had common sense, what does PADI stand for? I'm fairly certain for this lecture, the understanding is Professional Association of Diving Instructors. So I earned 25 of my 26 scuba diving certifications, if they want to go into that level. So, just pointing that out there in comparison, in the conjunction of being an ordained reverend, and my work from my childhood and my teenage years, and my biological adult years, just in swimming before I got involved with scuba diving, in my way as far as how I do scuba diving in comparison. So, I literally was made fun of because of how much gear I had. So I was made fun of because of how many knives I had for scuba diving. In comparison, I was made fun of for how many extra different gear I had just in case something occurred by these civilian recreational scuba divers. So if they were to actually think about what they made fun of me for, other than how I physically look, they'd actually be capable to think about the difference of their civilian recreational scuba diving compared to mine. And again, in reference to that podcast interview, there's a difference, a multitude of. So if there was some civilian recreational game that those types did and or do, I did not consent to that. So if their wishful thought is because I got involved in scuba diving, that's considered consent, that's not. Consent only is when you're informed. So I haven't been informed of any of that, if that's a hypothetical. And for the clarification of, I wouldn't ever, because I'm not that type. I don't do scuba diving in a civilian recreational way at all. And so then there's the aspect similar in 2019 to 2009, so in multitudes of ways. So in regards of the poofy fish, in prior official YouTube videos of mine, subscribe to my official YouTube channel, and also like my official YouTube videos. In conjunction, if you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect, and go to my website, www.susankneeling.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. I made the choice repeatedly, despite the fact that that individual and I did not date, like in where it was a more known factor, despite being in Carrollton, Texas, and going out. I don't know how that individual thought that he could walk around any area with me and be camo. I mean, seriously, but whatever. Anyway, I mean, it was just the year of 2009, you know, in the DFW area. And so in Carrollton, you know, okay, sure, I didn't have these tattoos. I did have this one, that one, that one. I mean, this one's been updated, but, you know, and then I didn't have this one, but I had that one, and that one, and that one, and this one's been updated, but it's still, you know, my hair. So if he thought that he could camo when being in Carrollton, Texas, when we went out a few locations, I don't know why. Nonetheless, during the time frame of volunteering at International Scuba, I brought up the situations, as I've explained in my lectures regarding my official YouTube videos, similarly to how I've explained in regards of the updates to my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susankneeling.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. Which in turn, common sense would be similarly to Ish regarding 2019 of attempts I made to discuss in person, face-to-face in person with that individual regarding the poofy fish from Cozumel. Anybody who's known that individual and the attempts to actually stay on point regarding topics knows how that goes. So if any individual has ever made attempts to actually be serious with that individual and tell that individual that there was stuff that needed to be discussed in comparison, well then others know exactly what I dealt with. Anybody that may have dated that individual, you know what it's like to try to tell that individual to actually be serious in comparison. In that hypothetical, if he's he's had to have dated other people before me, I would guess. I mean, I can't be the first person he's ever dated in scuba diving, and if I am, well then, okay. Well, I can't be the only person he's ever dated, I would guess. I mean, you know, in comparison, I look as I do. And, you know, I mean, seriously, in comparison, the background, I couldn't be the only person he's ever been with in any capacity, because otherwise, if I'm the only person, that would kind of require being informed of that in an official capacity. It's kind of a big deal, by far. That would be so weird, because in a different capacity, it'd be kind of funny if he was like, what is it? There was this show I found. What was it called? It's a cute show. The Sheldon. The Sheldon character, that's such a cute character. That'd be so funny. I don't know the storyline as far as that particular one is concerned, but that'd be funny. Though a bit of a combination regarding a few other factors, I guess. I don't know. That'd be irony of ironies. But anyway, I didn't watch the whole series of whatever that doohickey bob is called. I did find that though, it's a cute one. Anyway, so that particular situation, in a roundabout aspect, because yeah, the requirements of actual discussions, although it would make sense as to certain things regarding Jeff Waters and Sally, as far as how those situations and those capacities would be, which then, you know, if it wasn't brought up because of the way, they would know if he had thrown any temper tantrums, and so would his scuba diving stuff as far as that particular point in time. Nonetheless, in that particular reference of the if aspects, I made attempts, but again, there are those who would know what it is to make attempts to actually speak with about, you know, especially in person, face to face, in person, which is an irony regarding, what is it, that Tim McGraw song, Remind Me, and stuff like that. Well, that's on him to want to actually know. So anyway, I remember. I made attempts. I've got patterns of behavior that would be capable to prove those particular situations, as to which it would include 2019. As far as the state of Texas in an overall capacity, though, in addition to Washington State. So anyway, in those particular references as to those types, again, I also didn't consent to quite a few situations. So if in that civilian recreational scuba diver sector, there's this merger that's occurring on the 6th of June, 2022. And so if there were a bunch of individuals, similarly to myself, who did not consent to any game like that, well, there's the situations regarding the Georgia Guidestones as to the acronym with the initials for the state of Georgia and the word Guidestones, which just so happens to be in reference to the year that SSI had begun regarding that particular scuba dive group. And maybe, just maybe, there were others that found out and did not have a positive viewpoint of that. And so what would civilian recreational scuba divers be capable to review regarding those in stone reference aspects to those particular rules in the civilian recreational scuba diving sector, if that just so happens to be something to take in consideration? So I do apologize in reference to earlier within my official YouTube video regarding a needless situation that shouldn't have been a problem, and having gotten much closer to the particular camera screen. However, I do hope that this particular official YouTube video of mine has been informative as well as assistive. If you are going to leave a comment, please make sure to have etiquette and respect. Subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube videos, and go to my website, www.susanmeling.com. Today is Thursday, the 26th of May, 2022. You have a good day. It's Thursday, the 26th of May, 2022.